Hello and welcome to Part of the People with me, Graeme Pryce. When I started this channel, I intended to bring you my honest opinions and, where necessary, factual information, mostly about the Tories and their incompetence, arrogance and corruption. It wasn't very difficult to find things to talk about because we were living under the worst government in UK history, and it came easy to me because of the absolute fundamental and deeply rooted and well justified hatred I had of them. I had no idea, really, I suppose I was being a bit too optimistic, that getting rid of the Tories wouldn't end the continual barrage of disinformation and misinformation that the great British public is subjected to on a daily basis. I should have probably expected that it was going to carry on. I was paying attention when they called Jeremy Corbyn everything from an IRA sympathiser to a Czechoslovakian sleeper agent, and put a picture of him looking like a Russian stooge on the BBC. So I know that the UK media are fully prepared to tell millions of people outright lies if it keeps anyone or anything remotely left-wing out of office. You know, obviously. Even I'm a bit shocked and feel a bit lost at the sheer state of what is going on with the remains of the far right in this country and the rest of the far right in other parts of the world. And the media that support them at the moment, though. And the response to the sentencing of child murderer Axel Ruda Cabana has illuminated quite a few aspects of it for me. We'll have a little look right after this. I was just looking at my channel analytics and I noticed that 53% of people who watch my videos weren't subscribed. The pain. Come on, just have a quick check that you've subbed, liked and rang the bell. Make a skinny old scouser a little bit happier today. I couldn't have imagined the levels of misinformation, bigotry, disinformation and racism that would follow those events in Southport last year, and I don't think very many other people could have done. Over 6 months later, the right, the further right, the far right and the downright fucking fascist are still trying to use the tragic death of children to score political points and extend the range of their bigotry, aren't they, every day? The grand liars themselves might have been removed from office, but they haven't gone away, and they likely never will. Unfortunately, we can't expect to live in a world where nobody is a nasty arsehole. What is new, though, is that nowadays we seem to allow these people in government, or to own 90% of the media, or to have social media accounts where they can speak to millions and millions of disillusioned people. They feel emboldened now to strike a match and chuck it on the haystack, then sit back rubbing their hands in glee while their evil bank accounts clock up money from their rage baiting and clicking stuff, aren't they? Maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself there, but I've been paying attention to some of the questions that the more intellectually bereft of us have been asking in the last few days, and the comments that they make. I mean, I could wax lyrical about the lies of the media and the Conservatives and Nigel fucking Froggage for hours, and I'm sure I will in future, but I think we're just going to have a look at a few facts and things that have stood out for me today. I mean, you're not going to get any facts from Reform UK or Kemi Badenoch, are you? And probably not the BBC these days either. So I'm going to share some of the questions I've been asked and comments I've seen made and just answer them with what I think is a bit of decency, honesty and actual research instead, so I know that I'm not talking bollocks or spreading disinformation instead of knee-jerk reactions, outright bullshit or weird political point-scoring rhetoric. Yeah, looking at you, Badenoch, you creepy hag. I'm not going to ramble too much on each of these points, tempting though it might be, because I'd like as many people to see this video as possible, so I'm going to try and be concise for once. Let's deal with the biggest comment, and the one that Reform have been pushing for, apparently, strangely enough. Bring back capital punishment, bring back hanging. We got rid of capital punishment over half a century ago because it only takes one miscarriage of justice for an innocent man or woman to be murdered by their own government. It's not a deterrent, and there's absolutely no data to back up the claim that it is. Although I'm aware that Anne Widdecombe, a woman who looks like she was mummified in the same batch as Tutankhamun and has views just as fucking archaic, has been on Talk TV and various other right-wing sites saying that there is evidence. There isn't. She's basing her figures on research done in the early 70s, and she's leaving out any bits that don't agree with her. Cherry picking. Derek Bentley was a name that came up a lot in the comments section of my video about capital punishment, and I know who he is, but if you don't, it's worth having a little Google. And maybe also have a little look at the case of Timothy Evans, a guy with learning difficulties that was blamed by serial killer John Christie for a murder that he'd actually committed and was subsequently hanged. Yeah. That was in the early 50s. That's two people I can think of immediately that were innocent and were basically murdered by the UK government. There are many more. Have a look. Thankfully, there's absolutely no chance of a Labour government bringing back capital punishment. Though, let's remember that Priti Patel has said that she wanted to bring back capital punishment, and she had said hanging once. And Reform are fully in favour of it. So if Labour hadn't have won last year, imagine the conversations we'd be having now. I dread to think. The next one I've seen a lot of is stuff like, it's two-tier Keir's fault. Keith Starmer is to blame. He was head of the prosecution service. I hate Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer was elected in 2015 and he left his position in the CPS in 2013. Actual Rudy Cabana was 7 years old then, and he was probably just cutting the heads off Lego figures and stamping on ladybirds in the park at that age. Starmer had also only been in office a few weeks when the murders happened. It's weird how these same people aren't attacking the Tories for underfunding the Prevent service that ignored 3 referrals because they couldn't find evidence of attachment to any particular terrorist organisation or ideology. Which leads me on to the fucking imbeciles that are still trying to read Islamophobia into it and saying, yeah, but he had a book about ISIS. Yeah, he did. He did have a book about ISIS. And that should have been a warning sign that was heeded. But he didn't have it because he's a Muslim. He had it because he owned all sorts of various sources of media and spent a lot of his time looking at violent and disgusting things on the internet. Remember, he would have just been at that age when you're starting to look around and learn a bit about the world when the ISIS uprising happened. Of course, a twisted kid who was obsessed with violence was going to take note of ISIS. They stormed across the Middle East, raping, beheading and mutilating people in the past, didn't they? And it was very public at the time. He'd also created the toxin, ricin, the same stuff used in terror attacks by far-right groups in China during the 90s, and used by a Bulgarian dissident to murder somebody in the UK in 1978 with an air rifle inside a hollowed-out umbrella. It's like something out of James Bond, to look it up. Yet somehow, we aren't seeing people saying that he had a communist ideology or you know, that he was a Stalinist or a Trotskyist or a Marxist or something, are we? And then, of course, there's the racists and the far right that are just trying to blame immigration, as always. These are the people that believed Nigel Farage's lies on Twitter when he said he was just asking questions. And then it turned out that the questions he was asking were prompted by misinformation from violent sex trafficker and all-round fucking alpha arsehole, Andrew Tate. Let's just end on a couple of statements that apparently these characters still don't seem prepared to hear. He was not an immigrant, he was born in the UK. Being black is irrelevant unless you want to admit that you're some kind of horrible Nazi prick that thinks you can't be British if you're black. I don't think you want to stand up and say that, do you? Let's be honest. He wasn't a Muslim. He wasn't an asylum seeker. Apparently, he didn't have any particular religious leanings, but he was raised by Christian parents who came from a country that has over a 90% Christian population. I'm afraid, if you went out and chucked bricks at the police, who were trying to deal with a community that had just seen the most violent event in recent history, because you believed he was an Asian Muslim asylum seeker, then you're either going to have to stand up and say, yeah, I was wrong and I made a horrible and stupid mistake, or you're just going to have to deal with the fact that 90% of people in the country think you're a fucking idiot. What's it to be? Thank you for watching if you've got this far. It's tempting to bang on about it a bit more, but as I said, I don't want this video to be too long. I want people with a short attention span to watch it. Axel Rudy Cabana was sentenced to over 50 years with little to no chance of parole, really. He'll never get married, he'll never have children, he'll never drive a car, he'll never own a dog or go on a holiday. He won't lie on a beach with a snoozer full of Charlie like Tommy Robinson. He'll never boast about a million idiots following him on TikTok like Nigel Farage. He'll probably never use the internet again unless he's supervised. And he'll probably lose his virginity to a big hairy bully called Steve or Colin. Yeah. I wouldn't usually say something like that. It's a bit harsh, but it doesn't compare to the heartache, distress and life-shattering and altering grief that the families of his victims suffered, will it? And yes, Kenny fucking Bad Enoch, there has been a public inquiry launched. And as we now have at least a few decent people in government, instead of a shower of disgusting, opportunistic bastards, there might actually be some lessons learned, and the inquiry will be probably better funded. Though I'm sure she'll try and score some sickening right-wing zingers at the next PMQs that they can delight over on GBBs or Talk TV. Anyway, it's all getting, a bit emotional, isn't it now? So I'll leave it there. And as always, that isn't all I've got to say. But it's as much of what I've got to say as I'm going to say today. Ta-ra-la. In the thrall of the right-wingiest of all bastards. So I'm going to share some of the questions that I've seen in the comments. I've seen the light. Lord, I've seen that. Dumbass.